Hi, this is Dr. Charles Fay of the Love and Logic Institute, and this video goes out to the people in Catherine's professional book study club there in Edison, New Jersey. That's a long ways away from Golden, Colorado, where I sit right now, and I want to thank you for encouraging us. It's always great to hear nice feedback on something we work so hard to put together. And Love and Logic really is designed to help teachers take great care of themselves. That's the primary goal, and so many great things happen when we're having more fun with kids. And some of you in this book study also said you used it at home with your own kids. Now that's really fun. I'll share a little story first. This lady comes to us and says, hey, in your teaching book, I really like the idea of having a sign on the wall that when the kids start to argue, you smile and you just say, oh, when do I argue? And of course the sign says something like 11:15 and 3:15 p.m. daily. And of course they say, yeah, but that's during recess and after school. And that's when you say, I know. You just get real consistent with that. She said, it works so good in the classroom. I had so much fun with it that I decided to use it at home with my teenager. He was about 15. She said, nice kid, good kid, not big problems, but could be pretty argumentative, and I get pulled into those debates. And so she has a sign, and it says, I argue at 6 a.m. on Saturdays. Well, he tries to argue. She says, when do I argue? Well, that's dumb, I know, and when do I argue? And she walks away. Well, he shows up, that's right, at 6 a.m. on Saturday, and he's tapping her gently on the head, just kind of right above her as she's laying in bed. Her eyes wake up, they open up, and here he is, about this far from her face, and he's smiling at her, got a big grin. What are we going to argue about? What are you talking about? Oh, your sign says 6 a.m. on Saturdays, we're going to argue. And Mom says to him, I don't know. And he says, I don't know either, but we got to argue. And she said, we had the most fun, the most pleasant time trying to figure out what we were going to argue about. And what really happened was it created a little humor, a little story that we can tell now that he's older, and it made all the difference. And isn't humor important, especially when you have such a demanding job? Well, some of you sent in some wonderful questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer these questions. And when people ask me questions, I always say, I'm going to give you an answer, and I'm going to do my best to give you a good one, but you get to decide whether you think it's any good. So I'm going to put my glasses on here, and I'm going to read this first question. It says, hi, Dr. Fay. And by the way, I like people to call me Charles, so you can call me Charles. Thank you for a useful book, both at school and at home. My question pertains to small group station time. As we move more to blended learning styles, I'm not always teaching in a way that's easy for me to slowly move towards a student or whisper to them. Oftentimes the students I need to speak with are not the students I'm working with directly at that moment. It's really hard for me to redirect or stop certain behaviors without either interrupting my group or calling their names out. Neither seem like good options. Any advice on what a Love and Logic classroom looks like during these times of day? Thanks so much. Well, you're certainly welcome, and I get that question a lot. It's always a challenge to me. What I have seen some teachers do, and that's really what Love and Logic does. We look at highly effective people, and we write books about what they do. And so I've seen some teachers decide that when they're working in these small groups, and that's what I understand your question to be, they have one small group here, they have another small group here, and the kids are supposed to be working independently, and you're working with a small group, but what's happening over here? Well, you're having to attend to this group, so maybe there's some misbehavior or distraction going on over here, and how do you handle that? Well, I watched an amazing teacher, and she had this whole routine where she would sit down with the group of students she was working with, and she'd get them started, and she'd give them just enough instruction to do a piece of what they were going for, just a piece of the lesson. Then she'd say, when you guys are finished with that or you need my help, you're the nose group. And you put your finger right on top of your nose, and that's how I'll know that you need a little help or you're done. And and then she'd go over to the ear group and she'd get started. And so she'd say the same thing to the kids, but their job was to all hold their ears like this, and that was a little signal that knew that they needed a little bit of help. And the kids were conditioned to know that the teacher was going to switch groups from time to time, and it was kind of unpredictable, so you never knew when she was coming along, and it was always done in a real friendly way. And that way, as she's moving around from one group, she might be able to smile at another group and kind of wink at them, which is sometimes a nice message, like, oh, you guys, I got to see what's going on over there. And sometimes that's all it takes to get things settled down, or maybe that would give her an opportunity to sit with that group that was getting a little rambunctious and maybe just say, hey guys, what's the next piece on this? Just a little redirecting. But it's this idea, and again, this may not be a good answer to your question, so I apologize, if that's the case. But what we do know is if we stay stationary in one spot, other stuff's happening over here. And so finding a way to give them some prompts, get them started, some little signals to know when they're done with that segment of the lesson so you can get back around may be one piece of the puzzle to your question. There's an added benefit. Very frequently, kids come to believe that they can only come to a gestalt or closure on a learning concept when an adult is seated with them or standing right by them. It happens by conditioning. Whenever we get closure on this learning concept, whenever we go, aha, that's how it goes, there's always a teacher next to us. And you can see how kids can become pretty dependent on believing that they need to have the teacher next to them. So an added benefit is we kind of want the kids to come to some closure on some of these concepts when we're not there. So they have to look around and think, well, maybe I learned it, or maybe my friends helped me learn it, and we don't have to be totally dependent on the teacher all the time. So let's read another question that the wonderful group sent me. And again, this is fun for me, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. So it says, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and strategies with us. You know how you gain wisdom? By making lots of mistakes. So I've made a lot of mistakes, and I still make them, because we never really get to the point where we know what we're doing, right? It's a lifelong battle. Okay, so I won't share the mistakes I keep making with you, but just know that I struggle too. It says, I have a few quick questions. I feel that many of us feel that we have some control over the students when they are in our room with us. Do you have any suggestions for when the students are away from us or away from me? For example, at special or at lunch and recess. I feel that sometimes I get a bad report from these adults when I'm not in the classroom with my students. What can I do about this? Well, the first thing is I recommend just being the very best role model you can be, the very best teacher you can be, and helping kids learn a lot of skills by doing that. My assumption is you're already doing those things. The problem is that I have really no direct control, as you point out, over what happens when the kids are not with me, particularly when I have them for such a limited part of my life as an educator. So I don't like this option, but I'll share with you the only one that I've really come up with that's, I think, controllable, is that when you get a bad report, maybe from the specials teacher, and the kid, you can go to the kid, and I'm assuming the kid doesn't do this for you. I mean, you get along pretty well. I think I would look at the kid and say, I'm sure glad you don't do that when you're around me, and then you move on. Because how much time and energy do you have to really devote to how the kid behaves in other places where you have no control? And then I guess one option is to go to those other educators and say, I know it's really frustrating, and I don't want to minimize this in any way. And really, I want to be very clear about this. This is not about being flippant or just passing on the issue to somebody else. It's just that we can only control what we have control over. But I think one of the things we can do in a very kind and sincere way is to go to those other people and say, I hear this happen, and I'm really sorry. This is so frustrating. I really would like to support you. And so I have some ideas about, some little experiments. Love and Logic is about experiments. We never say, hey, do this. That's a way to start a fight. a little experiment with this kid you might be able to try. And the first thing I would share is the one-sentence intervention where I notice positive things about the student. Because if that specialist teacher or that other person can get the kid to fall in love with them, are they going to have fewer problems? Probably. So I'd share that little experiment. But there's a deeper issue at play here. When I solve a problem that is between two other people, it never goes well in the long run. So in other words, if this child is having problems with the specialist teacher, or I don't want to single out the specialist teacher, or maybe the people who are watching at recess or the cafeteria monitors, whoever, if I get in there as a teacher and I solve that, then the kid does not have respect for the person they had the problem with. It's almost like they think, well, you know, the cafeteria people can't handle me, so they just tattle on me to my teacher, and then I get in trouble. So the way we gain respect from students, and this is very well laid out in this book, and here's Teaching with Love and Logic book, this principle is laid out multiple times. It's like, you know, if I'm having a problem with a kid or another adult, I have to be the one that really interfaces with that person, because that's what builds respect, and ironically, that's what builds relationship. And so I would suggest perhaps consulting with the people and saying, you know, here are some little experiments, but well, I think that you probably have enough we all have enough challenges just getting the kids to behave when they're with us. So again, I'm not that happy with that answer. I wish I had more control over people when they weren't around me, but you know, I don't think I do. So hope that's helpful. Okay, it says what else here? Also, do you have any advice for new teachers? I feel that at times I struggle to incorporate new strategies for fear that this was not how I began my year. Do you have any advice on this as well? So my advice for new teachers is that, well, I had somebody give me advice when I was a new teacher. And I was on the phone with this mentor of mine who's a brilliant lady. Her name was Dr. Sylvia Rimm. And she wrote a lot of great books. You should check them out. Dr. Sylvia Rimm, R-I-M-M. But I was complaining to Sylvia. I said, "Oh, I just hate my job." You know, I was really down, and I was having a lot of struggles, and it's so hard. You know, I'm like just pouring myself out. And you know, she said to me that was so helpful. She said, "Well, that's the way it's supposed to feel." And it kind of set me back a bit. I said, "Huh?" And she said, well, it's a really hard job, and it takes like 5 years for most people just to kind of start feeling like they have some ground under their feet when they start teaching." And she said, "You're normal. You're going to be okay. It's just the way most people feel." And that, ironically, was helpful to me, because it does say that, you know, we can speed this up by hard work and lots of learning, but it's one of those things that it requires so many skills, deep subconscious skills. In other words, it requires a lot of wisdom to teach well. A lot of things that nobody can really teach you. You have to kind of learn doing it and learn how to integrate your own personality into it. It just takes time. And so that's the first point I'd make, is be patient with yourself. You know, you can always send letters 20 years from now to the kids you had your first year. I felt like apologizing to some of them. But anyway, that's another story. Be patient with yourself. Now, how to integrate in new skills? Well, the good thing about Love and Logic is that it's not about like making this earth-shattering revolution in your classroom all of a sudden. We never recommend throw everything out, do Love and Logic. Here's an example of how we might integrate it. You fall in love, let's say, with the idea of setting limits with enforceable statements. Very common sense idea. I describe what I'm going to do instead of telling the kids what to do. So instead of saying, "Okay, everybody turn to page 6, I say, "I'm teaching from page 6. So instead of saying, "Hey, hand your papers in on time," we're saying, "Hey, I give full credit for papers that are handed in on time." And again, you'll see the information in the Teaching with Love and Logic book there. And let's say that just speaks to you, okay? And it's a natural because you're interested in it, but It's not a natural to do on a daily basis. So here's how you start integrating. You say to yourself, I'm going to see today how many minutes I can go in the class period without telling kids what to do about anything, And so you have some fun with it. And I think a lot of days, even though I'm pretty good at this by now, I make it 5 minutes. And then I say, I tell a kid what to do. Not the end of the world. Sometimes we have to tell them what to do. But then I say to myself, made it 5 minutes, pretty good. Next day, you make it 12. Oh, one day you're just on top of the world and the kids are behaving well and the cosmos is in order. And so you make it 3 hours. And then the next day you make it 3 minutes. But it's that kind of fun self-challenge where you pick a skill, start to experiment with it just a little bit at a time. And you don't have to feel like you have to give the kids an explanation. You might, if anybody says, hey, teach, what are you doing? You can just smile at them and say, oh, just having some fun, learning some new skills. If you'd like to hear some ideas about what I'm doing, come and visit with me tomorrow at 3:15 p.m. and I'll be happy to share it with you. And you don't have to explain it to them. They'll catch up with it pretty quick here. So let's see if we have any other questions on my sheet. I'm looking here. I'm not seeing any, but again, I want to thank you and I want to encourage you, and I hope I have. I hope I've encouraged you by saying really the primary job is to take great care of yourself, and I hope that's helped. I hope this book has. So have a great day in Edison, New Jersey, all the way from Golden, Colorado, home of Love and Logic Institute. Take care.